I loved this episode was David Leach, a former Met Police cop. He seemed to me like he could have just walked off the set of Line of Duty, the British cop show. He had the right voice, he had the right look,
Yeah.
and he had a long record of investigating some of Britain's worst crimes.
Yeah, he was. That was a great get on, and was a friend that said he was over here. It might have even been Charlie that knew him. They worked on a case where
Sure, it wasn't Johnny Lewis.
he probably trained with Johnny Lewis. Everyone trains with Johnny Lewis. He was like something from The Bill or Prime Suspect. You're quite right. Just a classic Scotland Yard detective. Again, attention to detail, thorough, and I really liked. We had a good chat about the interview room and the way he approaches the interview room and the type of things that come out in the interview room. But he had some very high-profile cases, and it was interesting sitting down talking to him. And I could see how he found his way at the forefront of being in the actual interview room when they are dealing with these serial killers, because he had a way about him, a confidence and a professionalism that would carry very well. But, I think I'm fortunate to get to speak to people like that.
Britain's really dark, isn't it? You know, we it's not just that they make great cop shows. Some of the crimes, the famous crimes that I can think of that people like Dave have to investigate at the Met Police, the murder of Jamie Bolger, the Soham schoolgirls, the murder of Jill Dando, which is a big Netflix show at the moment. It can be a really dark and scary place, England.
Yeah, I know. I think the environment creates it too. Like you can set England up and, a murder on a tropical island doesn't look as bad as a murder in a dark, misty valley or in an industrial area. And I think we see that, but it's the size of the population they have too. And I think America is America, but in England I think having the condensed population is going to bring these type of people out.
Someone else who's seen the dark side of humanity is Andrew Carpenter. That was a great interview. How did you get on to Andrew?
Andrew, I became aware of Andrew when I was doing the podcast series Predatory with Madeline West, and we interviewed Andrew Carpenter. He's a solicitor, and he's done a lot of work for victims of sexual assault, and he's described as and this is not him describing himself this way, but someone has described him as the most hated man in Australia of pedophiles. And
Wow.
What a proud thing to be. He's got some of the stories that he told just shocked me, and it really did. It just sort of opened my mind to how evil the nature of this crime is. He's campaigning very heavily, and I think he's involved with Grace Tame and a few others about pedophiles having to forfeit their superannuation. And this has been raised in Parliament, and they're pushing it because what happened, and he used very specific examples, and I hadn't thought of attacking it this way, but invariably it takes a long time for child sexual assault to be reported. I think it was something like, on average, 23 years later. By that time, these people have lived their life, they've probably finished their career, and they retire. They've destroyed the lives of the victims, but they retire with their super fund that can't be touched. They can't be sued civilly on their super because their super was isolated. So Andrew had been campaigning to have the superannuation laws changed. He's a solicitor. He said, and he's a very smart fella. Said it's not that hard. It just needs the will of the Parliament to change it. And I think, and he made a lot of sense. Like, why should we as the public be, footing the bill to look after the victims when you've got the perpetrators? They might have served their time in jail, but they still walk out with a healthy superannuation. If you think teachers or whatever, they've been in the public service, they've built their superannuation up, and that's not touched. So, there's some just different ways of approaching crime, and that's something in the podcast that's opened my mind up, because as a cop, my thing was, okay, well, you commit the crime, we're going to investigate it and, put you in jail. And then it sort of stopped there, and then you move on to the next one. But these people trying to make a difference in so many different ways, and it's sort of mind-blowing. And what I've learnt, they're fighting crime harder than I ever. I thought I was a crime fighter, but these people are making a difference on what they're doing, just approaching it from a different way.
Craig Foster,
Yeah.
the former Socceroo, he's now a leader of the Republican movement. And he came on the podcast to talk about all sorts of things, but including his refugee advocacy work. What did you make of Craig?
Oh, that he actually blew me away. And this is, it gets embarrassing how many people I'm impressed by. But Craig, such an articulate person. And, obviously I'm a soccer fan and followed his football career and his analysis in the media on what he's achieved there. But so informed on so many different topics, and I think it was someone that really impressed me. And with his advocacy, what the situation was, if people hadn't heard it, there was a person, Hakim Al-Arabi, that was detained in Thailand, and he was going to be deported back to Bahrain, and Craig became aware of it because Hakim was a soccer player, and someone reached out to Craig about it. And it wasn't Craig's responsibility. He didn't know Hakim, and he just looked at it. And he's also a qualified lawyer. He's one of those high achievers. Qualified lawyer, captain the Socceroos. What else do you do? A human rights activist, TV star. God, I get jealous.
He's
sometimes.
Also a silver fox.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to say it, but he's a good style of a bloke.
Yeah.
So Craig, and I thought it was fascinating. I really think it touches into what I hope to achieve on I Catch Killers, get people to look at different situations. And Craig just made the decision that this is not right. Because of his profile within the football, he could approach FIFA to come in, which FIFA, the head of World Soccer, he could lobby them. And he also had the nous as a journalist, how to get the media interested. And it became on that petition. I think Craig mentioned during a couple of things that really stuck with me. He said that Hakim's wife said, will you do everything you can to save my husband? And he said, I felt so much pressure. He went over to Thailand. He saw him coming out in ankle bracelets and all that. And if he went back to Bahrain, there was a chance a very good chance that he mightn't be seen again. And then there was another part where Craig and his wife were talking about, we might be destroyed for this. If I really back this could be the undoing. I'm employed by ABC or SBS. I'm going to really go out on a limb here, criticise governments, all sorts of things. And they made a commitment, well, it's a price we're prepared to pay. What a great story and what a great human being and made a difference. And that's where I really respect people that stand up. Sometimes when bad things happen when good people don't stand up, and in this situation Craig stood up and actually made a difference and perhaps saved someone's life.
In hindsight too, it looks like an obvious decision. It looks like the right thing to do, but it's interesting that it was something that he really agonised about. Like, I'm taking a big risk here.
Yeah. And so he weighed it all up. And sometimes, doing the right thing when the price is pretty high is the people I respect. But a really impressive guest, and I enjoyed having him on the podcast.
Tom Carroll is another person who had a really uplifting story. Speaking of people who seem to be able to do anything.
Well, I had never had a person on the podcast. I had pictures of him on my wall growing up, so that was embarrassing. So he had the advantage over me right from the start when he came in.
Yeah.
Tom Carroll, those that don't know him, 2 times world surfing champion, absolute legend of the sport, and I'd followed his career as when he was winning world titles and that. He had a really interesting story, and I loved his openness and honesty about it, and a life journey that I think it was the 80s when he was 2 times world surfing champion, the surfers of those times were the rock stars of the world. They were, surfing had just taken up, it had gone from that sort of hippie image to these were the sports stars. They were treated like rock stars. Tom embraced that world and everything it had to offer, and he went down a path of taking drugs, became addicted, and the embarrassment that he felt, like he had so much pressure on him as being the world champion. He knew he was a role model, and then he's sneaking off and scoring his ice and all that. And you think, and this is where he was open about. He said, I'm not like everyone else. I can beat this. And it was really a lesson for all of us that no matter how good you are, that we've all got the weaknesses, and drugs can bring anyone down. So with Tom, he went down a really dark path with his addiction, trying to hide it, the shame of it, and the impact it had on his, not just his career, but his friends, his family, and all that. And then he's decided to turn his life around. And his brother Nick Carroll, who's a good writer, he did a lot of work. And I think their family, Carroll's family, came from the newspaper world. Their father. Mm. So Tom told a real honest, raw story. Mm. And what I liked about him now, like he's come back in and he's into meditation and yoga, and the guy's just so cool and so zen-like. And I told him the story that I was away with some mates on a surfing trip. This is only going back just after COVID lockdown, just on the North Coast. And we're just staying in some cabins on the beach on the North Coast. And I went down to check the surf and came back excitedly, all of his old surfer mates of mine going, Tom Carroll's down on the beach. And so they all went down just to have a look. Yeah. And I said, what's it like with that sort of pressure, being that famous? Because he walks on the beach and we're all just standing there, in shock. Oh, there's Tom Carroll. But he's a really balanced person, and it was a great having a chat with him and the life lessons that he's learnt and the path that he's on now. Like, full credit to him. And I think that showed a lot of people that no matter how high you go, you can still fall, but there's always a way of coming back. It's
almost like it makes it more likely, isn't it? It's amazing when athletes get into drugs because they're so careful about what they put in their bodies and how they treat their bodies. It's their instrument. It's their way of making money. And yet, this secret habit that is threatening all of that, I guess that's humans' desire for kind of self-destruction.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you operate at that level, I can't imagine what it feels like to be a world champion at something and just have all that adulation. This is your passion and you are the best in the world. How do you deal with that? And I think quite often they're looking for that high. Yeah. Like they've got that high when they were competing, and then that's taken away from them at a very early stage, like professional athletes, and whether it be footballers, fighters, surfers, it's taken away from them. Where do they find that adrenaline rush? Where do you find that walking down the beach and everyone's standing, clapping you, and then you've come out and you've won a world title? You've just risked your life in huge waves. And so I think they're looking for that, something there. So I can see how it can occur. But, it's a potentially tragic tale, but he turned it round.